Hello, and welcome to another episode of For the Love of Sports. My name is Michael Rasile. This is a show where we get to talk about sports, we get to talk about business, and we get to talk about everything in between. Wherever you're listening, however you're listening, you know what to do. 5-star review on Spotify, like and subscribe on YouTube. Over on Apple Podcasts, give me a nice review. For me and my incredible guest today, I have Shirpal Shah. He is the author of Leveling Up with AI, a strategic guide to AI and sports marketing. Author of The Art of Victory, AI and the New Frontier of Global Sports, and recently named Chief Digital Officer over at Next League. Shripal, how you doing, man?
I'm doing great. Thank you for having me, Michael.
Pleasure's all mine. Second time Shripal has been on the show. We had him back on about 10 months ago. A lot has happened in AI. A lot has happened in sports since then. So we're going to talk about some of it. But the first question, Shripal, I have for everybody on the For the Love of Sports podcast is, why do you love sports so much?
I love sports for the way it really can bridge gaps, right? Like in political differences, cultural differences and things. It's just the one thing that can really be a uniter. And I always thought that was like sort of lip service, but as I've gotten older and really sort of seen it, and now that, my kids have gotten older, I really feel like that's one of the greatest things, right? It really is this great connector that when you leave the arena, you could be on polar opposites of whatever it is, right? It doesn't have to be politics. It could be any point of view. And, it can be a thing that could bring people with really different points of view together, or you could be really good. You could have a lot of same interests, be good friends, but sports could also be why you're right for that moment. You're rooting against each other. So it's this great dynamic, right? Where people can be rivals during the game, buddies after. They could be rivals outside the game, yet they're really, they're bonded in that moment for rooting for that shared passion. So it's a really interesting dynamic that I really appreciate.
It is beautiful, man. I've said it on the show once or 100 times at this point. If I walk anywhere in the world and see someone in a Mets hat, I'm going to walk up to that person and say something. I don't know what I'm going to say to that person depending on the country, but I will walk up and say something. And that's why we love it, man. I mean, think about, we're a couple days away here, a week and change away from the Super Bowl. I'd say the United States kind of stops for a day for one football game, which is pretty wild, right? 120 million people might tune in. That's about a little over a third of the entire country. There's really nothing else on that day except Super Bowl pregame and then the Super Bowl itself.
Yeah,
People are getting ready, cooking food, doing whatever they have to do. It's just wild. So yeah, no, it is absolutely incredible. So I do love that aspect.
I do too. And I think right, like when World Cup's going on, we had our honeymoon in Greece when the World Cup was going on many years ago, and just watching again everyone outside, different countries, and like the bonding. It just stopped when the games were going on. You couldn't hear a pin drop, and cricket when India Pakistan play in India, it's the right. It's when you have these moments, and for us, it's the Super Bowl here. As growing up here, for us, it's the Super Bowl. But that's what I think is so really interesting.
It is beautiful, man. And you worked for the Commanders, correct? Back in the day, they almost
I
made it.
did.
They almost made it.
I know they almost made
Almost.
it. So I spent 9 years. I was the chief strategy officer there, and really drove a lot of their innovation around emerging technologies at the time. And, we were back then, they were one of the top teams in overall revenue, digital revenue, social media revenue. So it was a really innovative time. So so to see the Commanders now come so close to getting to the Super Bowl and again against the Eagles, it really just brought up a lot of those old memories when I used to travel with the team, be in the press box, right? And you'd sort of be every breath you're like in watching because right, because it's your job as well, so everything on the game would kind of determine how Monday is, so it had that
Hmm.
emotion. And watching the game, when this year for the NFC Championship really brought that back because I had been working outside of sports while I was doing angel investing, consulting and stuff, as we said a lot, a year ago. It wasn't the same, so now it's like kind of knowing that I'm going to kind of come back into sports full time, and it was just really interesting.
That's awesome, man. Yeah, I really wish Washington won that game, but unfortunately, here we are with the Eagles in another Super Bowl. So I know who I'm rooting for. But I guess that's just me, man. But no, I do think it's really interesting, right? Again, you came on the show about 10 months ago, last April, just about 10 months ago, and we talked about a lot of things revolving around AI and sports, how people can start to utilize it. You and I have had personal conversations over those last 10 months. Hey, how can I start to use it more for myself, for my family, for my job? And I've appreciated those conversations with you as well. What are some of the, like, the crazier things? I mean, there's a couple more recent things, but, like, can you give us, like, a quick what's kinda happened over the last 10 months? Not really specifically from a what has AI been able to do, but more from, like, a, I guess, perspective of people not just accepting, but starting to be like, "Okay, this is clearly the future. Let's start to utilize this a little bit more." Where are some of the areas that you're starting to see that?
And I think you're seeing it across a few different areas, right? I think there is more of an acceptance around AI generated content than I think there was a year ago. And I think part of that is a lot of media companies have been very transparent on how they're evolving. I was in November at the ESPN Edge conference, and they were debuting or speaking to, right, with their partners, Accenture and Microsoft and AWS and others, the things they were doing with AI around media. And right, one of the things they're using now is generative AI to create dynamic video packages for articles that they may not have custom content for. And it's to drive more engagement because 60% of the traffic were going to pages that had videos on them. And now for the other sites, they can now create these custom packages, and it just makes it for a more enriching experience. And it's not like AI is speaking to them, right? It's allowing then the talent and the resources to then go do more, right? And I think that we had talked about that a year ago, and now we're actually seeing it in the market. And I think now that you look at the search engines, a lot of the generative AI searches are built in, like with Google and Gemini, right? So there's a lot more integration, Microsoft Copilots and the tools. So I think that's the other advent that we had sort of talked about of a lot of our day-to-day tools are going to have some of these AI features in them, and it should be used to help us do things faster. And I think that's starting to materialize. I think the quality of the output and the models has, as we predicted, exponentially grown, right, in terms of intelligence, reasoning, complexities. But even from like an image and video creation, the level of images and videos that can now be AI generated are materially better than they were a year ago. And I think that is something that's really interesting. Full disclosure, I wrote an article about this when I was using like a service I was using in the retail world, and I was able to create AI generated composite imagery based off of, in essence, just like a product shot of a Lamar Jackson jersey. And we were able to create scenes of a family by Big Ben, if in the hypothetical scenario, like the Ravens were playing in London, a wedding in the Eiffel Tower where the groom's wearing, a Lamar Jackson jersey. What if, the Ravens, Lamar were to sponsor a NASCAR race car? Different like families doing a family of full of Raven jerseys in front of like destinations within Baltimore, all AI generated, right? The people, the backdrops, and it all, if anyone were to look at that article, you see that it looks very realistic, right? The text is readable. You don't have the distortion that people associate with like the ChatGPT generated images, right? The caliber is really crisp. And I think that's a great example of how fast things have changed. They went from like sort of cartoony, imagery that people are using to real photorealistic content that you could basically get on your credit card and start using this. And if you're a designer or photo production, potentially save hours. And you're talking about something that might be a few $100s a month, right? So the costs have gone down, the quality has gone up, and now you're starting to see it across the board. Integrate into search, integrate into your tools, in content production. I think what you're also seeing, and there was a little phenomenon going on the last couple of weeks, this thing called Bordy, a little voice generated AI that sort of, the claim is that the AI sort of spoke to someone, it's a voice AI, and raised $8 million themselves, pitching themselves to a VC. We can go into the spin versus PR versus the truth of that. But the point was like, if you were to interact with Bordy, and it has like this Australian accent, it's really a voice AI used to, in essence, connect people. It's acting as an ultimate networker, it's free to use. I spoke to Bordy just like I'm talking to you. It was a 20-minute conversation asking about my career, asking about my interests, asking about what motivates me, back and forth. And I would argue the majority of people who would talk to Bordy would just think they're talking to some Australian guy who just called them.
Mm-hmm.
And I would argue it was a more pleasant conversation than I get solicited on my cell phone from vendors multiple times a day, for technology, for whatever. And the conversation, the crispness, was better with the AI than it was with some of the cold calling reps that are calling me. And I think that is also what we're going to see in 2025 because major retailers are looking at voice AI to reduce their call center cost. That is like a reality, not a theory, where they could potentially reduce 60-70% of their cost with knowing all these retailers that are starting to run into like bankruptcy issues like Party City Fall. That's a real benefit. But now you apply to sports. I was talking with an AD at a John Wall Street event at the college football champion, the day morning of the college football championships, and we are talking about AI, and I'd done a bunch of presentations the night before for a bunch of different ADs and commissioners showing different use cases. But we're talking about like how like for a bowl game, the ticket office gets inundated by single game tickets, but or even for like someone with a season, right? Like if it's a university AD, how could you solve for that? With voice AI, you could handle something that's just for the single game ticket holders, and then you could put your folks with your full season ticket holders and offer that prioritization without losing any of the service layers. And I think that is going to be the types of things that we'll start seeing in sports, or we should, because it could potentially save an organization hundreds of thousands of dollars in either staffing cost or lost opportunity. Because that single game customer could have a single game party suite, and they may have a quick question, or it's a guest to them. You don't know who you're turning off by making them wait for 20 minutes. And if you can make that experience better, it should hopefully allow you to service your customers in a better way. I mean, a lot's been going on this week. I think there was a major disruption in the AI space that sort of shook the stock market. So I think there's a lot of things going on, but the big thing is the models have gotten materially better. The level of innovation, every 2-3 months is like what would have been years in terms of iteration and improvement. And the cost to deliver that has also gone less. They're better and they're cheaper. And I think that's the other thing is the computing cost to do this has actually gone cheaper than it was a year ago. And I think that is also it's great for what can spur a lot of innovation, knowing that a lot of sports organizations have very tight budgets, is that you can now take these things for amplification, automation, and really bring some innovation that can drive real cost savings that allow folks to reinvest that into other areas of their organization to hopefully create a better product.
I love it. That was a great recap, I guess, of kind of what's been going on. I always thought, going back to like one of your first points, I always thought people like making fun of AI because the images weren't great. It's like, well, it just started, and it like what's Moore's law? Like the computing power doubles every 18 months. Like I feel like it's every 18 days with this shit. That it's like it is getting better and better significantly. So like I use ChatGPT to make funny images all the time. It's just a fun thing to do, right? I'm thinking about this, let me do it. If I'm watching a football game, I always do like this team's mascot versus this team's mascot and like really funny, hilarious images. And then I send them to my friends. It's gotten better from that standpoint, but also the answers, right? I've been using ChatGPT since pretty much when you and I spoke the first time, a little bit before then. It's probably about a year now, and just like the opportunity, the yes ands, the ability to be able to, as you said, just derive more content from it quicker is incredible. I also spoke to Bordy. Great conversation, super nice guy. I think the Australian accent piece was like the best possible marketing outside of the PR spin that you're
I
talking
agree.
about.
Exactly.
If it was just some dude, it wouldn't have been the same thing. The fact that it was some Australian guy, like, I don't know, it just like it felt, I don't know, more real, or as weird as that sounds, like it felt more realistic having that conversation. But yeah, I also spoke to Bordy and I agree. There was like some slight hesitation, slight pauses, but like you could have just taken that as someone trying to think about their answer, which is literally what he was doing, right? So it's very interesting from that perspective.
I agree. No, I mean and that shows like in 4 months, Bordy's going to be potentially even better, and I think that's like the scale. And we talked about this a year ago. Like, if you hire an intern on day one, the quality isn't going to be anywhere close to something that you could just use unless they're an amazing intern. Yet over 10 weeks, you may train them, and now all of a sudden you have something that could be like a an employee, right? But in many cases, then that intern leaves. If that a fraction of that effort, and instead of 10 weeks, we did 10 hours training an AI model, that output is going to be materially better. But everyone's reaction is always off the first
Hmm.
response, which isn't optimized. They don't know how to interact with, as we had which is why I wrote the
Mm-hmm.
books originally.
Yep.
But the corollary to that is what's changed is because those models have gone materially better, even if you don't know anything anymore, the initial response is 5 to 10 times better than it was a year ago when you and I first spoke, right? Like you use ChatGPT 01, you use the latest version of Claude 3.5, you use Perplexity. It's now just immediately giving you high quality output, even if you just type it in. So like it, or comparatively where it was a year ago. And I think that's the other thing is like these things are just getting smarter and smarter. So even like the nuance, not knowing them, like the gap has shrunk, which
Mm-hmm.
makes the ability to then go to market with something even faster.
Yeah, no, it is incredible. Some of the cool things are happening. One thing that I personally do is I have on my work calendar a 30-minute scheduled call every single week with ChatGPT just to talk about everything that's going on at work. Hey, what would you do? How would you do this? And I feel like because it's scheduled, because it's there, and because it's like talking, right? I'm literally talking back and forth to it. It's not the greatest conversation I've ever had, but again, like I know the more I do it, the better this is going to get, and the more adept I am going to be at speaking to it. It's speaking to me, and then again, in 4 months, 5 months, 6 months, it's going to be 10 times better than it is today. So just continuously having those conversations with it, I think, it has been helpful so far, but I know like it's more, the reason I'm really doing it is because in the future, it will be something that everyone will have to do at some point during their work week because it's the best thing you could possibly do.
I mean, what you're doing and what you're explaining is what I tell everyone, right? Like by using this, even in like the funny images, talking to it, right? You're breaking down your own procedures, your own biases, the way you do things. You're forcing yourself to actually go back to being curious, going back to like just trying new things, that openness. So then when like say your organization wants to bring in voice AI for their service reps, right? Since for where you work. Now if you had to train that model and that system on your policies and service rules because of what you're doing with ChatGPT now just for fun, you're going to actually be better equipped to do it in a more commercial setting because you've already broke down all of the insecurities and the awkwardness.
Hmm.
So now you're actually making yourself more efficient to do these type of tasks when they start arriving. And I think that's the part of this. The people who just start doing it are inherently right by doing it as long as you have for the last year since we spoke. You've developed a new skill set, and as these other tools arrive, you're also more adept to now be able to apply it immediately, which then allows you to do more. Therefore, you're gonna have a better output, which then could give you a faster track in, like say your career projection or whatever else you're trying to do, sales, etc. So I think more people need to continue doing that.
I agree, man. I tell everyone like I don't really Google much anymore. Like I try and chat GPT everything because then you always want to ask Google a follow up question. I don't feel like clicking into an article and reading halfway down to find the answer. Like give me the answer and then I want to ask a follow up and ask another follow up and then I want to reframe the question so I want to ask it differently, kind of getting to a different answer. Like that's just kind of how I've been training myself essentially for the last year is just trying to get at it. I'm not going to sit here and say I'm perfect, but I'm definitely better than I was a year ago, Shripal. I can promise you that. And I think it's benefited me significantly. So
And I think for sports organizations and media outlets, right, that's one thing they got to think about now. How do I make content that I want to be indexable by the AI LLMs, so that when people are starting to use this to look for content, my content, not something that's inaccurate, starts surfacing, and I'm actually getting it to drive it back, right? Like I think just like people had to learn about SEM and SEO, learning about optimization so that your content can show up on Perplexity or Gemini or ChatGPT or Copilot or Llama, right? Like how are you going to do that? And I think that's something now that sports media companies have to really think about, because when you think about the younger, like they're going to just start doing that. So within the matter of 2-3 years, if everyone's doing that, what's going to happen to your traffic? I saw a LinkedIn post, and it was one of those things it was from, I think, the former CMO or the current CMO at HubSpot, talking about the traffic loss, but then talking about how they're seeing more of the traffic now through their YouTube videos through ChatGPT. And I think that's the type of thing is like a lot of the bot traffic that was artificially keeping people's unique visitors and monthly active views that were annoying advertisers, like what's real, what's like clickbait. Well, by the loss of that traffic, you've gone back to a standardization, like, okay, this is what the people are seeing. But then it's like, how do I find new ways to now acquire those people where the ability for the media companies to now target the different AI models is going to be essential to then offset the loss of all that bot and cookie traffic that were sort of inflating these numbers that most savvy advertisers knew weren't really people, right? There was like in some cases as much as 40% of traffic could be bot traffic.
Wild. I mean, that's what, like half of Twitter isn't real, right? That's always like a fun statistic to throw around. Like, don't go on Twitter. Most of those people aren't real. Don't read the comments. Those people are not real. But yeah, man, I think it's absolutely incredible. And you brought up recently the what would you call it? It was very, very politically of you. The market effect recently, mostly the DeepSeek model. I didn't hear about DeepSeek once until I've heard about DeepSeek now 1,000 times over the last week and a half. A Chinese-based company came out saying that they trained, an AI model at 1/100th the cost or whatever that ChatGPT is capable of doing it with. Yeah, I mean, it costs, I think, trillions of dollars in market cap to some of these companies, Nvidia, Meta, Twitter, Microsoft, all these companies that have been working on some very high priced models at this point. So, like, I guess what is your take on all that, and exactly what could you give us a snippet of really what might be going on a little bit?
Yeah, so I mean, I think we need to put everything you just said in context, right? As of this past weekend, DeepSeek is not even 10 days out. So we're talking about something that really got momentum and you start seeing all the headlines, which was really about 5 days after its release. So it's not a thing that's been a slow build. It's like it just came out. It kind of it caught a lot of folks from, by surprise. And I think the effect is, right, it's as you said, it's the Chinese AI startup. They've released two models, right? What they call DeepSeek V3, which is a large language model that could rival, or some people think could surpass OpenAI, Google, and Meta in different benchmarks. And then DeepSeek R1, which is a reasoning model that has already outperformed the ChatGPT o1 model in some third-party assessments. I think the big thing was that DeepSeek V3 was developed for 6 million compared to, say, the estimated 60 million spent by Meta on its latest technology. The company had to use fewer specialized computer chips than their American counterparts. And the reason for that is their regulations, embargoes, or whatever the proper term is, of where the most advanced computer chips can't be shipped to China. The government sort of prohibits that. So they had to get, in essence, scrappier. So that has also led to, by developing something now for a tenth of what it was, that should be a boon to businesses because the cost has now gotten that showed that you could do right a $60 million project for 6 million. That means a $6 million project should be 600,000. 600,000 project could be 60,000. The other thing they're doing is they're making their code base, their modules open source, so that will potential, which none of the other major players had done, which other than Meta. So that fosters more collaboration and innovation. It challenges the sort of the closed source models of, say, OpenAI. It could potentially undermine the U.S. export limitations, but that's a different story for a different day. But I think the implications are it's kind of democratizing AI because it shows that you don't need billions of dollars to build something that could be just as good. It shows that all the innovation isn't just in Silicon Valley, so we have to be more globally aware. Right? It's more resource efficient, cost efficient, but also it has an environmental and eco impact. And so I think if you're a business leader or a sports owner, right, that means you get accelerated innovation, right? Faster pace AI advancements for more frequent releases. You're going to see a diversified AI landscape. And you could argue it's like iPhone and Android phones. Android started creating all these different models, right? It kind of changed the cost to get a mobile device. I think that's going to ultimately lead more choice and variety is going to lead to more solutions, which then the competition should lead for a better output for organizations that the cost, right, which helps on the terms of the cost considerations, because now you have a more cost-effective AI solution. So that's going to bring a solution down to organizations that may have budget constraints. So I think and I think that's why the stock market reacted the way it did, is that it has a really big ramification when you take what I just sort of threw at you
Hmm.
on its totality.
Yeah, and I think in a vacuum, I think, yeah, obviously, like if you can do something for 10% of the cost and have it be better, that's great. The one thing that I do see a lot of pushback online is, well, is it true? It's coming out of a, it's hard to believe something just like kind of popping out of no. At least for me, it's difficult that like something just pops out of nowhere. It doesn't help that it's from China, where let's be honest, their government. Not that I'm gonna say our government's the most
Yeah, no,
trustworthy in the world, but
I know where you're going.
there's some very easy pushback, I think.
But let's use the pushback, right? And let's assume it was like being used by the military for years or whatever people think, right? So it's not true. What is true is using a less powerful computer chip that inherently has lead to real cost savings. It's open source, so now other people can innovate on it that don't have to raise billions of dollars or hundreds of millions of dollars to do it. So it's brought the bar down, just like we used to say how generative AI brought the bar down. And it's going to force the other players now to really take a stand of, maybe I do need to open up my APIs. Maybe I do need to offer more cost savings. So the shock and awe of that is going to actually the outcome when we look at this and say, if you were to get back together in 6 months, the outcome is that it did bring the cost of AI down. Now, if people use them or use the known players of OpenAI, Claude, Copilot, that's to be seen. But it is going to, like, I firmly believe that you take all the propaganda or the
Hmm.
biases aside, there's a somewhat of a high probability that the net effect of this is in 6 months, it's brought the cost down. And by bringing the cost down and making it more approachable, that's going to lead to faster adoption, which will lead to faster progress. And I think that's, similar to when other things like when mobile, like, where you think of like your mobile device. Mobile websites at first were the little like MWeb pages back in the day on your flip phones, to people were just taking their website and just showing it on an iPhone device, trying to reformat it, and then like, oh, we need to simplify it like our MWeb. And then somewhere a few years, right, it could have been COVID or a few years ago, it evolved like, oh, wait a minute. I don't need my desktop and my mobile app website or my app to necessarily all be duplicative. I can actually now create unique, engaging experiences based off of the artifact that's there. And I think this is a step towards that, because what we have to get to is, how do you have AI, voice AI, AI is in your tools, AI is for content. How do you get it to a point where it's no longer considered the same generic, I'm typing and going? It's becoming its own artifact,
Hmm.
right? So what could be like in the Ray-Ban glasses versus what's in your Alexa device versus everything will no longer be repetitive. It'll start becoming more organic in terms of integration, which ultimately I think then leads to what all the people in favor of AI have been dreaming about for years. Is once you get to that level of organic integration, the experiences are going to be seamless. Where, right, it's like in like the Tony Stark talking to his, right, the AI and like his, in the movies. Are we going to get there fully? Maybe, maybe not. But I think you're going to get to some level of organic acceptance, and that I think that's going to change. It's exciting because it's going to change how people look at it. Like, could it help people with disabilities? Can it help the elderly? Can it help, people recovering from a stroke? Having these, like, by getting to that level, now those things become attainable, and that could then change people's life quality. And I think that then becomes no longer a productivity cost savings thing. It becomes I've made someone's experience truly better. And I think that's the side of it that I'm actually really the most excited about. And having elderly parents, you and I've talked about our parent issues and stuff. having these tools that could potentially increase quality of life for people at later stages, I think that could be a really impactful thing that I
No,
think.
yeah, no, I think like the way that you broke it down, I do appreciate it, right? Taking out the propaganda of DeepSeek and really just looking at it from like a very logical perspective. Costs will go down, which means and adoption will go up because of the open nature of it, which means more innovation, more adoption, and more opportunity. And then that when that snowball continues, right? It's been rolling down the hill, right? Slowly, but it's been rolling down the hill. Once that starts to really pick up speed, and this is more integrated into our everyday society, right? I mean, this was only what a year and change ago when ChatGPT came out, and now like I at least see. I mean, my algorithm's a little bit different than most people, but I see a lot more of it. But my company is taking a pretty firm stance of it's coming. Let's get ready for it, right? You don't have to be like 100% ready today, but make sure you're taking steps to be ready for it because in the very near future, we believe it will most likely be a pretty important piece of everyone's everyday life.
You know, what you just said is in some ways what the NVIDIA CEO said. He's like, you're not going to lose your job to AI. You're going to lose your job to someone who is using AI.
Hmm.
So either you get on board to learn how to use it, or you're going to lose your job to the person who does know how to use it. And I think that's the right. You hit the nail. Like that's in essence, I think what you just said,
Hmm.
and that I think is really being amplified by all these business leaders is that it's the human element. We're going to lose our jobs to other humans. They just happen to be the humans who have embraced this versus those who don't. And it's similar to other technology challenges, right? The humans who embrace social media versus those who didn't. And that's where you started seeing a skill set disparity. The people who embraced, originally the computers versus people who didn't, right? And that created a skill set disparity. So I think that's going to be the skill set disparity. And it's like you want to embrace it because it's actually going to keep you, the person, valuable versus the one who doesn't. And the speed of this is just going to be what would have been a 10-year curve, we're saying, right? Could be a 2, 3 year curve. So we better get ahead of it.
Agreed. That's what we're trying to do. But now that we're talking about jobs, we should probably talk about your new gig, huh? Chief Digital Officer over at the Next League. What's that like? CDO? That's kind of cool. That'll look really good on a name tag. So kudos and congratulations to you on that. But tell us a little bit about what exactly is the Next League. What are you going to be doing? How are you going to be helping them level up here?
Yeah, so Next League is a company that's been around for 3 years. They're a team. They're a global team of strategists and technologists that specialize in creating, designing, building, and operating technology solutions for sports organizations. So, they're trusted by the teams, behind all these sports teams and organizations. They have been navigating complex technology, landscapes, uh, to help their partners maximize revenue. And what I liked about the organization is that they value that their superpower is their people. And I think when you think about, like, they just recently launched the website and app for the TGL, the
Nice.
Tiger Woods' new,
Love it.
and taking that from conception and ideation to what it is. And I think anyone who's seen that experience, it's phenomenal. They've been working with NASCAR for many, many years. They would been working, with the USOC and others. So they had all these um, big clients. And I think for me, as we talked a year ago, if I wanted to be able to take what I had seen in retail and other industries with AI, as we had said, retail was about 5 years ahead of sports and media. Where could you go where they already had the relationships? They've already demonstrated this ability to tackle complex problems and have this philosophy of our superpower are our people. Like that just felt like a really cool place to be. So I am so excited to be a part of Next League because it's still an early startup. They've only been around, in essence, for a little over 3 years, and they're working with some of the biggest leagues and brands in North America, and that makes, for me, and like my idea of like taking the innovation and driving, it really opens up that opportunity to do those things faster. As when we spoke a year ago and I was sort of trying to advise and help other startups and teams, there's only so much you could do as an individual. And I've been writing for this website, John Wall Street, a newsletter, that's trusted by all the senior executives, trying to really speak to thought leadership. I've been recently talking about loyalty, changing loyalty, taking the best practices I see in retail into sports. But when we're talking about cost savings, the advent of AI is now taking what would have been $20-30 million expenditures and making it attainable for the sports teams to actually afford, implement, and execute. And that, I think, is going to open up hundreds of millions of dollars in lost opportunity that teams aren't seeing today.
That hundreds of millions of dollars will probably make those billionaires' ears perk up for sure. Very, very good sales pitch on your part. I guess what are, if you're allowed, like what are some of the specifics, right? You said you talk about technology, but not everything's technology at this point, right? So like what are some of the specifics? Is it integrating this type of AI? Is it integrating voice AI into the ticketing department like we kind of talked about before? Or is that kind of more a little bit further down the road? What are some of the things that you guys are helping these teams and these leagues tackle now, specifically with the partners that you currently have?
So I think, yeah, their ongoing engagement, but I think a general problem that a lot of teams are trying to figure out is they have all these millions of social media followers, yet they still don't know a lot about the people that are actually showing up in venue. And then for some of those that have some information for the people in venue, they don't know a lot of their information for the people who, what they do out of the venue. You think about all the touch points someone might do to enter and leave an arena, right? They leave their house. They may stop at a parking garage. They may stop at a restaurant. They may then go to a retail concession outside the venue, and then they enter the venue. What do they do after? They might go back to a different bar or restaurant. All that sort of, that gives you a sense of the different types of people. That allows you to then contextualize your engagement. And that's being done in the retail space, right? In the travel and hospitality space. Think about how the hotels, if you're a business travel, you know that most of the hotels already know your room preferences. Are you a high flow or low flow person? Are you a double bed person or a king bed person? Or what airlines do you normally travel, right? Are you a Delta, frequent flyer, or United? Do you take Ubers or you take Lyft? They use all of that to then create targeted experiences, which is what's fostering that extra loyalty, right? They do that in the retail space. I think, when I was chief digital officer at Shop Your Way most recently, we knew a lot about our members because Shop Your Way had 50 million members. They have an active base. A subset of that, millions of active members. A subset of that also in the millions had their credit card. Because it was the credit card, you would you have an awareness of all the transactions someone's making in their life, and that allowed a loyalty and credit program allows someone to then really understand their constituent in a true life level. Like they're a Walmart customer, no, they're a Target customer. They go to, they go to Gold's Gym versus if they're still around, or into Planet
Planet
Hollywood,
Fitness. Yeah.
Planet
Oh, there you
Fitness,
go.
right? Right, like whatever it is, right? Or they go to eat at Planet, like that's bankrupt. But I think that is really the power, right? Are they shopping? Where do they get gas? How frequently do they get gas? Then you can really get a sense, okay, this person has long commutes or they're driving a lot and then, and that allows you to then really create this more targeted marketing vehicle that can then unlock more revenue. So other industries have been doing this for a while, and our sports fans are used to it, right? They're used to it, expecting it for their travel. So they're used to going to Starbucks and using their app and their points and the game, right? And a lot of that is AI driven. Like you think of, it's AI driven in terms of how you take different currencies and merge them together. So think of a hotel chain that has acquired 5 different chains. How are they making sure that all the points still work when all the systems are disparate and different? It's using some level of AI to then do those conversions and assessments in real time, where then to the consumer it's seamless. Like I don't have to worry, right? The biggest fear originally, like I'll use Marriott, was if I had my Sheraton Starwood points and I have, Bonvoy points, what happens? Am I going to lose this? Are they going to work? Marriott can't use my, and they've made that frictionless. So therefore, it's allowed those types of brands to now be more integrated faster, which leads to the bigger reason why people usually do acquisitions. But a lot of times when they're failed acquisitions, the biggest issue is that integration hasn't happened, not by the marketing, but usually by the systems, right? And that then leads to, or the people, and that leads to the interoperability, which can then cause other things. I think, I think that's where the AI can be really helpful. I think some examples though are you can use it right for your CDPs, your customer data platforms, and you can automate things, right? How do you automatically merge ticketing, retail, and sponsorship data? Eliminate the silos so that you really have a full, complete profile of your customers' behaviors and preferences. So now I know, Michael, you're a club seat customer. What you prefer, you know, pizza, Papa John's for your concession, and you're likely to buy a jersey and a hat, and then you can tailor the offering around that. I think there's also, predictive analytic platforms can identify ticket renewal risk, spot high value fans, and recommend dynamic offerings to boost retention. And then you have your AI powered personalization tools like Persado and OfferFit that can, Persado is used by a handful of baseball teams to create automated campaigns based off individual fan behaviors and preferences. So, like in that scenario, 20, 30,000 people in theory all could get a completely different email based off their individual preferences. And that's a really powerful thing, right? I've now talked to all 30,000 people. It's some combination of offers, but I don't have to treat them the same.
Hmm.
And that allows me to really, cater to everyone uniquely. And I think that's the stuff that without AI is possible, but it requires you know, hundreds of resources to do all this, and it's a much more labor intensive thing. Now it's been automated to be somewhat ubiquitous, which then allows for that efficiency.
Yeah, I think efficiency is the key to pretty much everything. It sounds like everything that you're saying. Mostly, it comes down to efficiency and effectiveness, right? Like if you're going to be one thing, be efficient. Because if you can be efficient, you can be good. You can be good enough, I guess, is a good way. And it sounds like, as you said, if you're capable of giving people what they want, right? My brother always says, "Fish gotta eat. You might as well feed them." Like, just give the people what they want. It's really not that hard when it comes down to the end of the day. They want a winning team. If their team's not going to be winning, they want to at least have a good time at the ballpark. Maybe grab some Shake Shack. Shake Shack's my favorite, not Papa John's. I just wanted to let the Shake Shack in City Fields, the best Shake Shack that ever existed. If anyone's never been, highly
I
suggest
agree.
it. It's the best Shake Shack that ever. I don't know what they did. It's incredible. It's better than all the other Shake Shacks, but that's neither here nor there. But yeah, that I think it makes sense from that standpoint. It is wild that sports is so far behind, considering the opportunity that comes with. I'm not a retail person, right? I'm not gonna go out on I love my Lululemon pants. That's about it. That's like the only brand, the only thing that I care about is like I would prefer Lululemon pants. But everything else I really don't give a shit about. And if I wasn't wearing Lululemon pants, I'm not gonna like lose my shit. I'm gonna be a Mets fan. I'm always gonna be a Mets fan. I'm never not gonna be a Mets fan. As much as I hate the Mets and the Mets hate me back, I'm always gonna be a Mets fan, right? So like there's that level of fandom that you really can't get in like any other industry. Yes, I'm sure like the top 1%, absolutely, but I feel like you can go down to like 50% of fans, and there's still like there's that level of fandom that you're not going to find, for the 50th percentile for Shake Shack, right? Like there's just not that computation. So it is wild that sports in general has been so far behind, and thankfully here comes our white and knight in shining armor.
I
Shripal's here
don't
to
know.
help everyone make a couple dollars, dude. I love it.
I hope so. I mean, I'm really excited about a lot of the conversations that, just a few weeks in, it's really invigorating. I think it's exciting because it's not theoretical. A lot of the European teams are ahead of it in terms of a lot of things we're talking about, to their credit. So it's also a matter of parity. Like we do the U.S. based teams want to be behind, their European soccer or or football as they call it in Europe, right? Compatriots who have global followings that are also billion-dollar franchises. So it's like you want to make sure that you can compete because you're still competing. You're competing in essence for a share wallet of that sponsor. There's only so much sponsorship dollars to go around. They're going to spend it. You want a higher share of that. And to do that, you're going to have the tools because if someone's generating a better ROI for that advertiser, because they now have that infrastructure, not only are you trying to do it to your ticket customers, you owe it to your corporate sponsors to have that same level of sophistication because it's becoming expected once they start seeing it.
No, it's beautiful, man. Yeah, it's I have a lot of friends. They have, oh, my number one is my number two, my number one's Arsenal, but my number two is the Kansas City Chiefs or whatever. And it's just like, oh, okay. What that tells me is like, if it came down to, do I want to buy a jersey for, I don't know, Is Saka still on Arsenal? I don't really know. I'm sorry. I'm not super up to date.
No,
Do you want to
neither am
buy a
I.
Mahomes jersey or do you want to buy a Saka jersey? Apologies if he's not on the team anymore or whatever it was. You're probably gonna, as you said, your share of wallet's gonna most likely, and there's only so much disposable income to go around. So I think it's awesome, Shripal. This was great. I really appreciate the time. I really appreciate you kind of going over everything what's been going on with AI, your new job, the stuff you're gonna be able to do to help people make a lot of money, which I'm really excited about. Everyone's always happy about making a dollar. One last time, where can everyone find you on LinkedIn? Where can they find your John Wall Street articles? Where can they find some of this stuff?
So you can find me on LinkedIn. John Wall Street articles are on johnwallstreet.com, and the books are on Amazon. And then with the new role at nextleague.com, you can learn about the clients, the process, and I'm pretty accessible.
I love it. Very accessible. You answer my emails, so I appreciate you for that one. One last time, we have Shirpal Shah. He's the author of Leveling Up with AI, a strategy guide to AI and sports marketing, and The Art of Victory AI, the new frontier of global sports. Who knows? Maybe another AI book's coming our way. We'll never know. He is recently named the Chief Digital Officer of Next League. One more time, Shirpal, this was fantastic. I appreciate your time. Time's the only thing we don't get more of, so thank you for yours, and thank you for everyone else's. Appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
Have a good one. Thanks, everybody.